Fellas, I think it's time for us to make sure we all know how this hydraulically operated transmission works. Chuck, you've worked on this type of transmission before. And Bill, you've got a good mechanical background. With three of us thinking, there won't be any question we can't answer.
Say, aren't you forgetting somebody, Lou?
Why, who, Tech?
Who? Oh, for crying out loud, me. That's who.
Well, think of that, Bill. We almost forgot Tech.
That's bad, Chuck. We need Tech around to keep our thinking gears from clashing.
And then you're willing to admit you need some help from me, eh?
Sure we do, Tech. The boys are just pulling your leg. Now, to be serious, let's begin this session on the hydraulically operated transmission by talking about the speeds and ranges. The hydraulically operated transmission is the constant mesh type with 4 forward speeds. The gears are divided into 2 ranges, power and driving, with 2 forward speeds in each range. The 2 speeds in the power range are first and second. The 2 speeds in the driving range are third and fourth.
About 98% of the time, the driver uses the driving range.
Right, Tech. And that means he starts up in third speed. At speeds above approximately 13 miles per hour, the driver lifts his foot from the accelerator pedal for an instant. The transmission then automatically shifts up to fourth gear.
Sure. And when the driver's using the power range, he starts out in first speed, and the transmission shifts up to second speed at about 6 miles per hour.
Now, you fellas understand that the transmission speeds are changed by putting different combinations of gears to work inside the transmission case. We change the gear combinations by moving parts in the gear case called sleeves. There are 3 of them. The manual clutch gear sleeve handles the shift between driving range and power range. It's controlled by linkage leading up to the gear shift lever. When that sleeve is back, it couples the first speed gear to the main shaft, and the transmission operates in the power range, first or second speed. When the manual clutch gear sleeve is forward, it couples the third speed gear to the main shaft, and the transmission operates in the driving range, third or fourth speeds.
Okay, but how does the sleeve couple the gears to the main shaft?
Well, here's how it works, Bill. The sleeve rides on the splines of the manual clutch gear, which is splined to the main shaft. Now, when the sleeve moves, it meshes with the clutch teeth on the sides of either the first or third speed gears.
Yeah, you might say the sleeve has got fingers that grip the sides of the gears.
Now, the direct speed clutch sleeve is the second sleeve in the transmission. The direct speed clutch sleeve also acts as a coupling. It rides on the hub of the third speed gear. When it's back, it isn't doing anything, but when it's forward, it couples the main drive pinion to the third speed gear. But the third sleeve, the constant mesh gear control sleeve, is a little different. It rides on the hub of the countershaft gear. The constant mesh gear control sleeve controls the positions of the rollers in the constant mesh gear, making the gear either drive or coast.
Right, Lou. That's the way it works. That direct speed clutch sleeve moves the constant mesh gear control sleeve.
That's right, Chuck. But remember, the direct speed clutch sleeve controls the shift between high and low speeds of each range.
How about explaining which gears are working in the different speeds, Lou?
Well, that's quite a story, Bill. Maybe we ought to cover that later.
Just a second, Lou. Let me step out and talk to the fellas in the audience for a minute. You guys who want to brush up on the power flow in the gears can wait till the record is finished. Then you can run through the silent pictures on the end of this film. Now, let's get back to Lou and the boys.
All right. We've explained what the direct speed clutch sleeve does. Now let's see how the sleeve is moved forward to make the shift. The direct speed clutch sleeve is moved forward and back by this arm called a shift fork. It's the connecting link between the sleeve and the hydraulic system. The shift fork is operated by the direct speed piston and a spring, just as the arm on a human body is operated by muscles. The direct speed piston is operated by hydraulic pressure from the oil pump, which is the heart of the hydraulic system. The oil pump is a rotor-type pump, similar to the pump used in the engine oiling system. The pump is located in the transmission extension housing and is driven by a pin in the main shaft.
As long as you guys are calling the pump a heart, I guess I can call the electrical unit's nerves, eh, Lou?
Right, Tech. The solenoid is one of the nerves. It operates the ball valve, which directs the flow of oil. When current flows through the solenoid plunger pushes the ball valve off its seat. Then, oil from the pump flows through the ball valve into an escape passage leading to the transmission sump. That means there's no pressure against the piston, and it stays back, keeping the shift fork back in the starting or downshift position. Now, when the circuit through the solenoid is broken, the ball spring pushes the ball and plunger up. That closes the valve. The escape passage is closed, and the pressure from the pump pushes the piston forward. This compresses the piston return spring and the fork engaging spring.
You see, fellas, it's the pressure of that fork engaging spring that moves the fork, shift rail, and clutch sleeve forward to complete the upshift.
Yeah, and another thing. As the piston moves forward, it uncovers two oil relief ports in the cylinder wall. These ports drain off enough oil to keep the pressure in the system constant at about 40 pounds.
Now, when the escape passage is opened, pressure against the piston is relieved. Then the return spring forces the piston back to the starting or downshift position again.
Okay, I get that. But tell me this. What turns the current for the solenoid on and off?
In order to make and break the circuit to the solenoid, we use an automatic switch called a governor.
It's a centrifugal type governor, Bill. It's geared to the countershaft gear, so it turns faster or slower depending on the speed of the car and the gear you're driving in.
That's right, Chuck. Now, in the cover, there's a set of snap-action contact points. They stay closed until the car reaches a speed of about 13 miles per hour in the driving range.
Above this speed, the points are open and the circuit to the solenoid is broken.
Right. You see, the governor is wired in the circuit so that when the points are closed, current flows from the hot wire on the coil through the circuit breaker, through the solenoid, through the governor points to ground. When the car first starts out in the driving range, the governor points are closed because the car's speed is less than 13 miles per hour. That means the solenoid plunger is pushed down, holding the ball valve down off its seat. This allows the oil to return to the transmission sump. Since there's no oil pressure against the piston, it stays back, and the transmission remains in third speed.
Well, things start happening when the car speed gets over 13 miles an hour, hey, Lou?
Right, Chuck. That's when the transmission is ready to shift up to fourth speed.
While we're turning the record over, you fellas can sock this away in your noggins. The transmission shifts up to the higher speed at about 13 miles per hour in the driving range and at about 6 miles per hour in the power range.
Now then, Bill, at speeds above about 13 miles per hour, the governor points open. That breaks the circuit through the solenoid, and the ball spring pushes the ball and solenoid plunger up, closing the escape passage. With the ball valve closed, all the pressure from the pump is directed against the piston. The piston moves forward, compressing the fork engaging spring and the piston return spring.
The fork engaging spring pushes the shift fork and direct speed clutch sleeve forward until the sleeve reaches the blocked position. Then, to make the upshift, the driver must lift his foot from the accelerator pedal for an instant to slow down the engine. When he does that, the speed of the main drive pinion drops and matches the speed of the clutch sleeve. Then the fork engaging spring pushes the sleeve onto the main drive pinion, completing the shift. Now, whenever the driver slows down below 11 miles per hour in the driving range, the transmission automatically shifts down to third speed again.
How does that automatic downshift work, Lou?
You already know that when the car speed drops down below 11 miles per hour, the governor points close. When that happens, the solenoid is energized, and the plunger pushes the ball valve off its seat. That dumps the oil, relieving the pressure against the piston. The return spring tries to push the piston and fork back, but it isn't strong enough to pull the clutch sleeve off the pinion because of the driving pressure or torque against the sleeve. To relieve that torque on the sleeve, we have a switch called the ignition interrupter switch. It's connected in the circuit between the governor and the ignition coil. The interrupter switch is mounted in the case directly above the piston. It's made up of a disc, a pair of points, and a small steel ball that projects partway down into the piston bore.
Yeah, and when the piston starts to move back on the downshift, the ramp on the piston raises the ball and pushes the disc against the points. That grounds the ignition circuit for an instant through the governor points, just long enough to take the driving pressure off the clutch sleeve. Then the return spring pushes the piston and fork back, pulling the clutch sleeve off the main drive pinion.
When the piston moves back, the ball drops down into its normal position. The switch contact is opened, and the ignition circuit is restored, so the engine doesn't stall.
Does that interrupter switch cut out the ignition during an upshift?
No, Bill. The interrupter switch does not break the ignition circuit during an upshift because the governor points are open then, and there's no ground for the circuit.
Right, Chuck. Now, there will be times when the car is being driven in fourth gear and the driver wants a sudden burst of speed, maybe to pass a car. Up to approximately 35 miles an hour, the driver will get a faster burst of speed if he shifts down into third.
Sure, and that's when he uses the kick-down switch. The kick-down switch is located in the carburetor and is operated by the accelerator pedal. Here's how it works. When the driver wants that burst of speed, he pushes the accelerator pedal all the way down. Now, this closes the kick-down switch and completes the circuit to the solenoid. The solenoid opens the ball valve to dump the oil so the transmission can downshift to third.
When the driver wants to shift to fourth speed again, he just lifts his foot from the accelerator pedal, eh?
That's right, Bill, and the transmission automatically upshifts. Now, the kick-down switch won't operate at speeds above approximately 35 miles an hour. You see, the switch contact is connected to a small piston which is controlled by the suction in the carburetor throat. At speeds above approximately 35 miles an hour, that suction is strong enough to pull the piston with its contact up out of the way. So, pushing the accelerator pedal to wide open throttle position cannot close the circuit in the switch.
I see. That's so the driver can't downshift at high speed and maybe damage the engine, huh?
That's right. Besides, he's got enough pickup without downshifting.
What's this other unit for, Lou? There's nothing like that on an ordinary carburetor.
That's the anti-stall control, Bill.
Yeah, that's where you'll find it on Chrysler and DeSoto carburetors. But on Dodge carburetors, the anti-stall control is mounted down here at the bottom of the float chamber.
The anti-stall control keeps the throttle from closing too fast and stalling the engine when the driver lifts his foot off the accelerator pedal at slow speeds.
Well, Lou, it looks like we've completely covered the electrical system of the transmission.
Right, Chuck, except for the circuit breaker. The circuit breaker is mounted either on the engine side of the left front fender or on the air cleaner bracket. The circuit breaker is located in the circuit between the ignition coil and the solenoid. It's a sort of a safety valve in the electrical system.
Right. And if the system becomes overloaded because of a short or ground, the circuit breaker cuts off the current to prevent damage to the units or a heavy drain on the battery.
You'll find a 12-ohm resistor on the circuit breaker case. It's included in the interrupter switch circuit. That resistor is a sort of roadblock in the circuit. It prevents a feedback of primary current from the distributor to the solenoid when the distributor points are closed and the ignition is on. The resistor prevents the piston from shuttling back and forth when the car is being started by pushing.
Yeah, and speaking of shuttling, we still haven't mentioned the shuttle valve.
Say, that's right, Tech. Well, the shuttle valve is mounted in the transmission extension just below the oil pump. Ordinarily, it's held down by oil pressure so that it blocks off a drain port leading to the sump. But if for any reason the solenoid doesn't open the ball valve on a downshift, the pressure in the system drops enough to let the shuttle valve rise and uncover the drain port. Of course, when the drain port is uncovered, the remaining pressure in the system is relieved and the piston moves back to the downshift position.
Yeah, there's no chance of the piston stopping where it can keep the ignition system interrupted for more than a split second.
How about using the engine for braking on hills with this type of transmission, Chuck?
Nothing much to that, Bill. It's just the same as with any other transmission on normal grades. Of course, if you want greater braking power from the engine on an unusually steep hill, you push in the clutch pedal, move the lever to the power range, and let the clutch pedal up. Now, that puts you in your second speed and gives you the best gear ratio for engine braking.
Yeah, but you gotta be doing better than 6 miles an hour or you'll be in first speed with no engine braking.
Sure, Tech. Now, if you're going down a hill in first speed, all you got to do is push the clutch pedal in when the car speed is above 6 miles per hour and then release the clutch.
I see. Then the transmission automatically shifts into second like you want it, right?
That's exactly right, Bill.
Chuck, you better tell Bill how to handle the shift to start the engine when the car's being pushed or towed.
Easy, Lou. In order to start the engine by pushing, you just put the gear shift lever in either the driving range or power range. Hold the clutch in and turn the ignition on. Now, if you're using driving range, release the clutch when the car reaches a speed of about 13 miles an hour. In the power range, you'd release the clutch at about 6 miles an hour.
Say, Lou, this fella Chuck knows the transmission inside and out.
Sure, Tech. As a matter of fact, he's finished up the fundamental story for us.
Yeah, and knowing the fundamentals is going to help you fellas when me and the boys come back with the story on troubleshooting the transmission. And don't forget, fellas, there's a silent trailer on this film, so if you want to review the power flow in the gears, just turn off the record and keep on cranking that projector.